In this video, we talked about what it means to post information socially and why that motivates people to use certain platforms over others, why it motivates people not to take risks when they use social platforms, and why it motivates some people to send private messages. And the way that people engage online and the reason why they're engaging that way is something that's really important to understand if you want to understand where people are coming from. How are they engaging with your own materials online? We've been talking about some psychological trends and how understanding those trends can help you engage with people and improve your marketing. In this video, in this next part of the series, we're going to be talking about how people engage on social media, especially considering that more and more people are growing up being exposed to social media. And so it's a part of their worldview. And so we want to understand how that influences people and how that changes the way that they behave on social media platforms as well as platforms that aren't social. We'll talk about why people might want to focus on sending private text messages or emails instead of posting things publicly and what it means to post things publicly. So first off, let's think about people's relationship to social media. And one of the key insights here is that people are their own source of media. When they post on social media, they're posting publicly, and so that reflects on them, and they know that everybody's going to see it. And so typically, like if you compare that to a company, that's something that companies are doing too. But when you're in a company, you typically get trained on how to do that. But an individual doesn't get that formal training, so they have to sort of think about what they're going to post and how they're going to behave online. And so one thing that many people are dealing with is the notion that every action that they do online can be watched or criticized or commented on and scrutinized by their peers or their family or their coworkers and even their future friends and family and potential partners and coworkers and so on. The notion that what you put online can be there forever. So we almost become very fearful. Some people can become very risk averse about what they put on social media. And this actually changes the way that people act. So there's an effect called the Hawthorne effect, which means that people start behaving differently when they know that they're being watched. And the notion that our behavior and our thoughts can be constrained by this fear in social media could really be holding us back as a society. It can have societal consequences in terms of making it difficult for us to come up with new ideas and to be risk-taking and to break rules. And that's why it's so important to articulate and understand how somebody's going to use social media. So one of the notions that sort of underlies this behavior that we manifest on social media is this term called content collapse. And what content collapse refers to is that typically the way we interact with everybody in our environment is sort of segmented. So you have one way that you interact with your coworkers. You've got a whole nother way that you interact with a particular friend group. You've got another different way that you act within a different friend group, and so on. And so you basically have these separate channels of communication and these sort of separate identities or personas that correspond to each of them. But social media doesn't have that. If it's open to everybody, then you basically only have one face, you only have one persona. And so those sort of complexity that might typically exist when you have these separate ways of communicating collapse into one individual, right? And so that's another thing that could potentially impact our perception of ourselves or as society is that you become more insular in terms of who you are instead of developing these diverse traits that can be useful in different circumstances. And so this is something that people have recognized. This is one of the main motivations for why people can shy away from posting on social media and being active on social media. It's something that we could readily understand with Facebook, for example, where first a younger crowd started using it and then their parents got involved. And then you didn't want to be posting where your parents could see what you were posting. And so you went and innovated and attached to a new platform. And so probably this human need to have these different segmented personas, this human need not to convey everything out to every single person, but to have certain messages sent to certain appropriate audiences, is partly going to drive the formation of these new social media platforms, the transition from one to the other. Because if the latest platform that the young people gravitate to so that they're only talking to their friends and not their parents, for example, if their parents get on that one, then they'll be motivated to find a new isolated platform where they're only talking to their peers. So Facebook understands this, and they've created lists so that you can only send posts out to certain people. So there are ways on Facebook to kind of address this. Snapchat is also a more intimate platform, so people can restrict their audience and their messages disappear quickly. So you're removing both the notion that everybody's seeing it, as well as the notion that it's going to be around forever. And that'll change the way that people behave in these apps. So the message here is that, you can measure what people are doing on public social media platforms, but that doesn't mean that they're behaving in a way that they would genuinely behave. They'll actually behave in a more genuine way and provide a more richer conversation in platforms where they know they don't have to be self-conscious about everything that they're doing and posting. They're going to provide more meaningful information in, for example, private text messages to each other. And so some of the more rich and meaningful interactions that people are having with each other are ones that are just really difficult to measure or impossible to measure. And I'll be talking about that even more. But for this video, I really just want to appreciate what it means for people to grow up in this age of social media. So if you just think back yourself, what did your parents tell you about how to use social media? Well, my parents didn't tell me anything because I didn't grow up when social media was around. But kids nowadays are growing up and they're actually having these conversations with their parents about how they should be using social media. And so you might find a decade from now that they're just like how many people are talking about how their parents pressured them to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, that people are talking about how their parents pressured them not to engage in social media because of the potential harmful reputation. Or you could be having kids a decade from now talking about how their parents pressured them to excel on social media, how their parents at a very young age, maybe they were only 13 years old, but their parents pressured them to get in a LinkedIn account and to grow their LinkedIn following and to post their accomplishments and achievements on LinkedIn because they're trying to get into a good college. So even at a really young age, like 13 and 15, some kids are actually trying to grow their identity on these different platforms for their future success already. And so in terms of the perspectives on society, this could have a potentially big effect. Now, the second sort of take-home point here is to say that when kids are cautious about saying things inappropriate online and being very risk-averse, they're not going through a natural process of being a kid, which is this sort of exploration, and it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to test boundaries and make discoveries. And so by not going through this sort of natural process of development, they might solidify their identity in a particular way without exploring other potential identities. So that's actually one psychological consequence of restricting their expressions online. So thanks for checking out this video. So in the next video, I'll talk even more about how it's harder to track people's behavior. Be sure to hit the subscribe if you'd like to subscribe. Hit the bell if you want notifications of our posts. Let us know in the comment what you think about any of these ideas, and hit the like if you like and the share if you share. Thanks.